Today we're going to be looking at a piece of writing that one of my students did, and she kindly gave me permission to use it in a video. So what I invite you to do this time is to pause the video and try to correct this piece of writing. With everything you know about grammar and punctuation, make a note of the improvements, corrections, and any other changes that you would make. And then I'm going to go through the changes that I made, but that won't be so useful if you just listen to it passively. Whereas if you engage your mind, see what you can do first, and then look at what I did, I think you'll find that a much more useful, interesting, and satisfying exercise. Okay, so I'm going to move forward now. All right, so my corrections are in blue. It was the summer of 2020, and I've used a semicolon here. At the end of this video, there are some notes about using colons and semicolons. So be sure to watch until the end and learn these really useful punctuation marks, which help you to write in a much more sophisticated, elegant manner. So, it was the summer of 2020. I, with my husband and children, travelled by Eurostar to England. So we've got the first clause about it being summer 2020, the second clause about it being I was with my husband and children travelling, and the two are very connected. They could be separate sentences, but they're very much related. So when we're thinking about the structure of our writing and how to organise ideas, things that are closely related together can be kept together, often in pairs like this, rather than separating them into different sentences. We began our 4-week trip from London. Now here, obviously a careless mistake. Stonehenge was famous tourist site in. It looks to me there that the student just hasn't read their work carefully. This is something that I'm constantly saying to students that do writing, is remember that when you've finished your writing, it's so important to read it. Check it yourself. Try to be as confident as you can that there are no errors in your writing before you offer it to anybody. Now, for those of you who are interested, there's a bit of information about where the name Stonehenge comes from. And again, here we can see just what looks like careless mistakes. And something is mentioned, this comic strip, Blake and Mortimer, with no further information for the reader. So again, empathize with your reader. Imagine what they know and don't know. And probably for most readers, a bit of information about this Blake and Mortimer comic would be useful if you're going to mention it. Otherwise, perhaps it's better not to mention it. And what I'm doing as well as just correcting the grammar mistakes, I'm offering alternative phrasing. We found it to be smaller than we'd expected. So think about tense and aspect here. We found it, so we're already in the past, to be smaller than we had expected, because you expected it to be a certain size, and then after that you found it to be smaller. So the expected comes first chronologically, but it's second in the sentence here. So we use the past perfect to show that the expected came earlier. We had a picnic on the famous stones at Avebury. Again, it'd be nice if there was a bit more information about Avebury for the reader. Here it is, just straight from Wikipedia. We visited the cathedral and museum in York. Again, information. So this Goathland station is mentioned, but no information about it. So here's a bit of information that I found. My daughter, who is a fan of Harry Potter, enjoyed visiting Goathland Station. Notice with these commas, if you read the sentence omitting what is between the commas, it's still grammatically fine. My daughter enjoyed visiting Goathland Station. So the commas are used to separate added information. Who is a fan of Harry Potter is extra information, but grammatically we can include it or remove it and the sentence will still read fine. And once again, a Vikings attraction, no information given. Now, it's not a Vikings attraction because that would be something that attracts Vikings. So remember that when you're using a word as an adjective, it's different from possessive. So it's a Viking attraction, not Vikings. And I overcame that by just putting the name of the centre. It makes it clearer. It gives the reader more concrete, more specific information. For anyone who's interested, there's a bit of information and a link if you want to have a look. My husband appreciated the tranquility of. Now, Shakespeare's cottage is mentioned. No information about that. So when you have a look online for Shakespeare's cottage, there's two possibilities. It could be his wife, Anne Hathaway's cottage, sometimes referred to as Shakespeare's cottage, or it could be his birthplace. I'm not sure that was a cottage, but these two possibilities came up when I searched for Shakespeare's cottage and what that would be. So here's links to those if you're interested. But clearly that kind of information should be included in the writing so that the reader isn't confused and there's no ambiguity. With our tourist pass, we were able to walk in beautiful gardens and stroll around many castles, even if it did rain quite often. Yeah, so I'm using even if here to emphasize the contrast. When it rains, we often don't want to walk around outside, but on this occasion we did because we're tourists on holiday. So the contrast of walking around outside and it raining means we can use even if. And a special treat in this sentence you could use. This place differs from the more ancient modern one in France. Okay, so this ancient place, okay, so it's ancient, the Roman baths, I presume we're still talking about, was different and still is. So you can use present tense because the difference is still there. It's up to you which one you want to use. I often choose the present tense because it makes the writing seem a bit more lively and interesting and relevant. So it says this ancient place was different from the less modern one. Now, this is a bit confusing because if the one in France is less modern than what? Less modern than the ancient place? Well, well, obviously, an ancient place is not modern, so the one in France can't be less modern. So that leaves me wondering which one was more modern. I'll leave you to think about that. English food, French food, which is better? Well, I think you'll find this correction sentence most edifying. Visual pollution mentioned here. A bit more information. You see the theme here? A bit more information about when you write, don't just mention things and then move on immediately. To make your writing a bit more mature and interesting, you have to actually explain one or two things. So there's some information about what visual pollution can be. More than anything else, we adored the undisturbed natural landscapes. If you're using a word, a simple word, in this case, liked, get into the habit of trying to use synonyms that are maybe more interesting, colourful, vivid, or appropriate. There's all kinds of reasons to explore synonyms. Because if you write saying that you like everything and everything is good over and over again, it comes across as boring and uneducated. So learn some synonyms for common words, and here I've used adored. Because it's liked the most, it's a superlative, like the best. So we can use a verb that's a bit stronger than like. And here with villages, with English villages, exotic just sounded a bit off to me. Maybe it's because I'm English, but I think of exotic as being, places far away. Maybe for people who were born far away, England is exotic. I suppose that's fair enough. But certainly from my perspective, I wouldn't call an English village exotic usually, but perhaps quirky. Well, there's an alternative for you anyway. Okay, punctuation. Very important subject and interesting too. If you can use colons and semicolons quite liberally in your writing, it does really help the structure and flow. Is what I'm about to say related to what I just said? Maybe a semicolon is better. Or is what I'm about to say explaining further what I just mentioned? Then you might use a colon. And there are numerous reasons for using colons and semicolons. Here's a summary of using colons. And here's a summary of using semicolons. So it is definitely a good indication of an educated person when they use these properly. If there are only two things you take away from this, one, proofread your work and try to correct it as best you can before you give it to a teacher. And think about your reader and give them the information they need to be able to move on without accumulating lots of questions. Here, Blake and Mortimer, Stones at Avebury, Goathland Station. You see the Shakespeare's Cottage. As you're reading this, the questions in one's mind are just going to keep accumulating, adding up, and that's very distracting. It takes attention away from reading further. Okay, I hope you found this helpful. Let me know in the next lesson. See you soon.